The explosions lit up the dark sky over Nexus Prime like deadly fireworks. Commander Zeph Kalen pressed his face against the cold metal window of the evacuation center and watched his world burn. The Skarath Empire had finally reached the heart of Coalition space, and nothing could stop them now. "Commander, the last transport ships are ready to leave," Lieutenant Vera Thoth said behind him. Her crystal skin glowed with stress patterns that hurt to look at. "We have maybe 10 minutes before their ground forces break through our defenses." Kalen turned away from the window. His gills were working hard, trying to filter oxygen from the smoky air. 3 years ago, he had been a proud officer in the strongest military alliance the galaxy had ever seen. 12 different alien species working together, sharing technology and protecting each other from threats. Now he was just another refugee trying to escape with his life. The Galactic Defense Coalition had seemed unbeatable at first. The Alterians brought their advanced shield technology. The Christex shared their energy weapons. The gas-breathing Vorthok contributed their fast ships. Together they had protected hundreds of worlds across the Outer Rim territories. Then the Skarath came. Nobody had expected them to be so ruthless. The reptilian species had appeared from beyond the galactic edge, moving from system to system like a plague. They did not want to trade or negotiate. They only wanted to conquer and destroy. Their weapons cut through Coalition shields like paper. Their ships moved faster than anything the Alliance had built. Worst of all, they seemed to enjoy causing pain. "How many civilians are we leaving behind?" Kalen asked as they walked through the evacuation center. Families of different species huddled together, clutching their few possessions. Children cried in languages he did not understand. The universal translator in his ear turned their words into his own language, but it could not translate the fear in their voices. "About 50,000, Vera replied quietly. "The ships are full. We cannot take any more." Kalen felt sick. 50,000 people would die because there was not enough room on the evacuation ships. The Coalition had planned for many things, but they had never planned for total defeat. They reached the command center where Admiral Yex Moraine was coordinating the retreat. The tall insect-like officer's compound eyes reflected the red warning lights that flashed throughout the room. Maps showed Skarath forces advancing on all fronts. Red dots marked fallen worlds. There were too many red dots. "Status report," Kalen said. "Bad and getting worse," Moraine replied without looking up from his displays. "The Skarath have taken 17 more systems in the past week. Our defensive lines are collapsing everywhere. The Outer Rim territories are completely lost. What about reinforcements? The core worlds promised to send help." Moraine made a sound that might have been laughter if insects could laugh. "The core worlds are building defenses around their own systems now. They think they can stop the Skarath there. They are wrong, but they will not listen to us." The building shook as another explosion went off nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling and several aliens cried out in fear. The Skarath ground forces were getting closer. "Sir, we need to leave now," Vera said. "The last transport cannot wait any longer." Kalen nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Before the war started, the Coalition had found something interesting in their historical databases. Records spoke of a species called humans who lived on a world so dangerous that it was classified as a Class 7 death world. Most species that evolved on death worlds destroyed themselves before reaching space. But the database suggested these humans had somehow survived long enough to build starships. The database was old, though. Very old. The last known coordinates for human space led to an empty solar system. Most Coalition scientists believed the humans had wiped themselves out centuries ago, like so many death world species before them. It was a common pattern in galactic history. But what if they were wrong? What if somewhere out there, beyond the known regions of space, humans still existed? Death world species were supposed to be incredibly tough and violent. If they had survived their own world and made it to the stars, maybe they could help fight the Skarath. It was a desperate hope, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Admiral," Kalen said, "what about the human coordinates? Did anyone ever try to contact them?" Moraine's compound eyes focused on him. "Humans? Those primitives from the old database? They have been extinct for centuries if they ever existed at all. Why waste time thinking about fairy tales when we have real problems?" Another explosion rocked the building, this one much closer. Through the windows, they could see Skarath aircraft flying overhead, their weapons lighting up the night. Ground vehicles moved through the streets below, hunting for survivors. "We need to go now," Vera shouted over the noise. The evacuation center emptied quickly as the last refugees boarded the waiting transports. Callan took one final look at Nexus Prime as his ship lifted off. The capital city was burning. The great towers where coalition leaders had once planned the defense of the galaxy were now twisted metal and broken glass. Everything they had built was turning to ash. As they reached orbit, Callan could see the full scale of the disaster. Hundreds of coalition warships floated dead in space, their hulls torn open by Skarath weapons. The enemy fleet moved among them like sharks, finishing off any ships that still showed signs of life. It was not just a military defeat. It was the complete destruction of everything the coalition had stood for. "Where are we going?" someone asked over the comm system. "Core Ward," Admiral Moraine replied. "We will try to reach the inner systems and warn them what is coming. Maybe they will listen now that they can see what the Skarath do to their enemies." But Callan doubted they would listen. The core worlds had been protected from war for so long that they had forgotten what real violence looked like. They thought their advanced technology and strong defenses would save them. They did not understand that the Skarath were not like other enemies the galaxy had faced. As the refugee fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Nexus Prime and its 50,000 trapped civilians behind, Callan made a decision. If they reached safety, if they found a place to regroup, he would try to locate those human coordinates himself. Even if it was just a fairy tale, even if humans had been extinct for 1,000 years, he had to try. The galaxy was running out of hope, and sometimes hope was all that stood between civilization and darkness. Captain Jake Morrison floated in zero gravity, watching the tactical display that showed the Skarath Empire spreading across the galaxy like a disease. The hologram painted a grim picture with red markers indicating conquered systems and yellow ones, showing worlds under attack. The blue markers representing free coalition space grew smaller every day. "How long have we been watching this happen?" he asked. Major Lisa Grant pushed off from the wall and drifted closer to the display. Her short brown hair moved freely in the weightless environment of the observation deck. "About 14 months since we started active monitoring. But our long-range sensors have been tracking Skarath expansion for 3 years. Jake nodded. The human expeditionary fleet had been stationed at the edge of known space for almost 5 years now, hidden behind experimental stealth fields that made them invisible to alien sensors. They had watched dozens of species make contact with each other. They had observed trade routes, diplomatic meetings, and territorial disputes, and now they were watching the galaxy tear itself apart. "Any change in their assessment of us?" Jake asked. "None," Lisa replied. "According to intercepted Skarath communications, they still classify Earth as an extinct civilization. Their databases list humans as primitive Deathworld survivors who probably destroyed themselves before developing interstellar travel." Jake smiled grimly. That was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. First contact protocols had been debated in Earth's government for decades before this mission launched. Some politicians wanted to announce humanity's presence immediately and join the galactic community as equals. Others argued for a more careful approach. The military had won that argument. Admiral Ben Hayes had convinced Earth's leaders that humanity should observe before revealing themselves. Learn about alien technology, study their military capabilities, and understand their politics before making contact. It was a wise decision that might now save the entire galaxy. "Admiral Hayes wants to see you in the briefing room," Lisa said. "I think it is time for the big decision." They made their way through the corridors of the UES Valiant, humanity's newest heavy cruiser. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, built with lessons learned from centuries of warfare on Earth. Unlike alien vessels that focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, human ships were designed around kinetic weapons and adaptive armor plating. The briefing room was crowded with officers from across the human fleet. Jake recognized most of them from training exercises and planning sessions. Colonel Amy Rodriguez from the Marine Corps sat next to Commander Sam Collins from Special Operations. Captain Tony Baker commanded one of the destroyer squadrons, while Captain Lisa Hayes ran the logistics division. Admiral Ben Hayes stood at the front of the room, his weathered face serious. He had fought in the Centauri conflicts 20 years ago, back when humanity's biggest worry was pirates raiding mining colonies. Now he was responsible for deciding humanity's role in a galactic war. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you all know why we are here. The Skarath Empire has destroyed the Galactic Defense Coalition and is moving toward the core worlds. At their current rate of expansion, they will control half the galaxy within 2 years." He activated a hologram that showed human space in relation to Skarath territory. Earth and its colonies were still far from the front lines, but that would not last forever. Intelligence estimates suggest the Skarath will reach human space in approximately 5 to 7 years. Hayes continued. We can wait for them to come to us, or we can act now while we still have the element of surprise. Captain Baker raised his hand. Sir, what kind of resistance are we talking about? The Coalition had 12 species working together, and the Skarath crushed them in 3 years. That is true, Hayes replied, but the Coalition was fighting the kind of war they understood. Large fleets facing each other in open space, energy weapons against energy shields, traditional military tactics. The Skarath were better at that kind of fighting. He changed the hologram to show human fleet formations. The ships looked smaller and more aggressive than typical alien designs, built for speed and hitting power rather than defense. Humanity has been fighting wars for thousands of years, Hayes said. We have learned things about combat that these alien species never discovered. Tactics, technology, and most importantly, the will to do whatever it takes to win. Major Grant stood up. Sir, our analysis suggests that Skarath military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and intimidation. They expect enemies to surrender when faced with superior numbers. They are not prepared for asymmetric warfare. Jake understood what she meant. The Skarath were used to fighting species that followed galactic military traditions, rules about civilian targets, proper battle formations, and honorable conduct. Humanity had learned long ago that survival sometimes required breaking those rules. What is the plan? Colonel Rodriguez asked. Hayes smiled for the first time in the meeting. Operation Shepherd. We are going to rescue as many Coalition survivors as possible, while demonstrating to the Skarath that they have made a serious mistake. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Human fleets would begin intercepting Skarath forces throughout their territory, focusing on rescue operations and supply line disruption. They would avoid large fleet engagements at first, instead using hit-and-run tactics to confuse and frustrate the enemy. The goal is not to defeat them immediately, Hayes explained. The goal is to make them understand that the galaxy is not as helpless as they thought. We want them to start making mistakes, overreacting to threats they do not understand. Commander Collins leaned forward. What about revealing our capabilities? Once we start fighting, they will learn about human technology. That is unavoidable, Hayes admitted. But we will control what they learn and when they learn it. Each engagement will reveal just enough to keep them guessing while hiding our true strength. Jake studied the tactical displays, thinking about the challenges ahead. The human fleet was impressive by Earth standards, but tiny compared to the forces the Skarath had deployed. They had 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and supporting vessels. Against an empire that controlled hundreds of star systems, it seemed like an impossible task. But humanity had faced impossible odds before. When do we start? He asked. Tomorrow, Hayes replied. Intelligence indicates a major Skarath pursuit force is chasing Coalition refugees through the Kepler Junction. That will be our first target. The meeting ended with officers returning to their ships to prepare for humanity's first open action in galactic affairs. Jake remained behind as the room emptied, staring at the tactical display that showed Skarath territory spreading like a cancer across the galaxy. Nervous? Admiral Hayes asked. Excited, Jake replied honestly. We have been watching and waiting for so long. It will feel good to finally do something. Hayes nodded. Remember, we are not just fighting for humanity anymore. We are fighting for every free species in the galaxy. That is a heavy responsibility. As Jake returned to his ship to prepare for battle, he thought about Earth and the billions of humans who did not even know this war existed. They went about their daily lives, working and playing and raising families, while their military prepared to face an enemy that could destroy entire worlds. But that was how it had always been. Throughout human history, soldiers had stood between civilization and chaos, fighting battles that most people never heard about. Tomorrow, humanity would announce its presence to the galaxy not with words or diplomacy, but with actions that would echo across the stars. The refugee convoy moved through space like wounded animals fleeing from predators. Commander Zeph Kalen watched the tactical display on his bridge and counted the ships under his protection. 43 vessels carrying survivors from 17 different worlds, all that remained of the once mighty Coalition presence in the Outer Rim territories. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, his sensor officer announced. Multiple Skarath signatures dropping out of hyperspace. Kalen felt his gills flutter with fear, but he kept his voice steady. "How many ships?" 15 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, support vessels. It is Admiral Vex Gorath's personal fleet. The name sent chills through every coalition survivor. Admiral Gorath was known throughout Skarath space as the Butcher of Kepler Station. When that research facility had tried to surrender, Gorath had ordered his troops to execute every scientist, engineer, and civilian worker. He did not take prisoners, and he did not show mercy. "All ships, this is Commander Kalen," he broadcast to the refugee convoy. "Prepare for emergency scatter protocol. We will try to buy you time to escape." It was hopeless, and everyone knew it. The few warships protecting the convoy were damaged and low on ammunition. They might hold off the Skarath for a few minutes before being destroyed, but it would not be enough to save the civilians. "Prey ships, you will surrender and prepare for processing," came Gorath's voice over the communication system. The universal translator made his reptilian words sound cold and mechanical. "Your species will serve the Empire in death as you failed to do in life." Callan was about to order his ships to attack when something impossible happened. His sensor officer looked up from his display with confusion written across his crystalline features. "Sir, I am detecting new contacts. Configuration unknown. They are dropping out of hyperspace between us and the Skarath fleet." The main screen showed empty space one moment, and then 12 ships appeared, as if they had materialized from nothing. Kalen had never seen designs like these before. They were smaller than typical coalition vessels, but looked more aggressive somehow, with sharp angles and weapon ports that seemed to bristle with deadly intent. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves," he broadcast on all frequencies. The reply came from the lead ship in a calm, confident voice that spoke perfect galactic standard. "Coalition vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valiant. Maintain your current heading. We will handle the Skarath threat. Earth?" Kalen searched his memory but could not place the name. Then it hit him like a physical blow. Earth was the homeworld listed in the old database entries for humans, the extinct Death World species that supposedly destroyed themselves centuries ago. On his tactical display, the human ships moved into formation with precision that impressed even Kalen's experienced eye. They positioned themselves in a defensive screen that protected the refugee convoy, while presenting multiple firing angles to the approaching Skarath fleet. Admiral Gorath's response came quickly. "Unknown primitives, you face the might of the Skarath Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift." Captain Morrison's reply was delivered in the same calm tone. "Negative, Admiral. This is your final warning. Withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences." Gorath's laughter filled the communication channels. "Consequences? You are 12 small ships against my entire fleet. I will enjoy watching you burn." The Skarath fleet opened fire first, sending streams of plasma energy toward the human vessels. Kalen watched the display, expecting to see the familiar sight of ships vaporizing under Skarath firepower. Instead, something remarkable happened. The human ships absorbed the plasma fire without apparent damage. Their hulls seemed to shift and adapt, spreading the energy across their surfaces until it harmlessly dissipated into space. It was like watching water strike stone. Then the humans returned fire. What came from their weapons was not plasma or energy beams. Instead, solid projectiles moved so fast they appeared as streaks of light on the tactical display. The first salvo struck 3 Skarath cruisers and they simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there, the next they were expanding clouds of debris. "Impossible." Gorath's voice had lost its confident tone. "What are those weapons?" Captain Morrison answered as his ships continued their deadly work. "Kinetic kill vehicles, Admiral. Solid projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. Your shields are designed to deflect energy, not matter." The battle turned into a systematic destruction of Skarath forces. Human ships moved through space with a grace that reminded Kalan of predatory fish, striking and withdrawing before the enemy could respond effectively. Their weapons cut through Skarath armor like it was made of paper. But it was not just their technology that amazed him. It was their tactics. Coalition forces had always fought in predictable patterns, following established military doctrine. The humans seemed to anticipate every Skarath move before it happened, repositioning their ships to take advantage of enemy weaknesses. A squadron of human fighters launched from one of the larger vessels, and Callan gasped as he watched them operate. They moved in 3 dimensions like they were born in space, weaving between Skarath shots and returning fire with devastating accuracy. Within minutes, they had destroyed an entire wing of enemy fighters. "This is impossible," his sensor officer whispered. "How can 12 ships defeat an entire Scarith fleet?" Kalen did not have an answer. He was watching something that challenged everything he thought he knew about space combat. The humans were not just winning, they were dominating. They made the fearsome Skarath Empire look like amateurs. Admiral Gorth's flagship found itself surrounded by human destroyers, their weapons trained on his bridge. The rest of his fleet was either destroyed or drifting powerless in space. "Admiral Gorth," Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication system. "Your fleet is defeated. Surrender your vessel and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Resist and you will share the fate of your ships. Your species is extinct," Gorth snarled. "Our records confirm it." "Your records," Morrison replied calmly, "are incomplete. You have 30 seconds to make your decision." The Skarath admiral chose to fight. His flagship opened fire on the nearest human destroyer, plasma beams striking its hull at point-blank range. The human ship absorbed the energy and returned fire with a single kinetic round that tore through the Scarith vessel's bridge. Admiral Vex Gorath, the butcher of Kepler Station, died instantly along with his command crew. As the last Scarith ships drifted silent in space, Captain Morrison opened communications with the refugee convoy. "Coalition vessels, this is Captain Morrison. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Do you require medical assistance?" Kalen found his voice after several seconds. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Kalen of the Coalition Navy. I do not understand what just happened here." "We intervened to protect civilian populations, Commander. It is what my species does. Your species is supposed to be extinct. How is this possible?" There was a pause before Morrison replied. "Commander, humanity has been watching galactic events for some time. We decided it was time to make our presence known. The galaxy needs to understand that the Skarath Empire is not invincible." As human medical ships moved to assist damaged refugee vessels, Kalen stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of one of the Skarath Empire's most feared fleets. In less than 20 minutes, 12 human ships had accomplished what the entire coalition military had failed to do in 3 years of war. He thought about the database entries that described humans as a death world species, evolved on a planet so dangerous that most life forms could not survive there. For the first time, he began to understand what that really meant. The galaxy was about to change in ways nobody could predict. The news of Admiral Gorth's defeat spread through Skarath space like wildfire. In the war room of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Skal studied holographic displays showing the wreckage of 15 warships destroyed by an unknown enemy. His scaled hands gripped the edge of the tactical table hard enough to leave marks in the metal. "Tell me again how 12 primitive ships destroyed an entire fleet," he hissed to General Vash Korak, his chief military advisor. Korak's throat sac pulsed nervously. "Your Majesty, the humans used weapons we have never encountered before. Solid projectiles moving at incredible speeds. Our shields could not stop them." "Humans," Skal repeated the word like it tasted bad. "Our databases list them as an extinct deathworld species. How can extinct primitives possess such weapons?" "We believe our intelligence was wrong, Your Majesty. The humans appear to have survived and developed advanced technology in secret." Emperor Skal turned away from the displays and walked to the great window that looked out over his capital city. Millions of Skarath citizens went about their daily lives below, confident in the strength of their empire. They had conquered 47 star systems in 3 years. No enemy had ever stood against them for long, until now. "What do we know about these humans?" he asked. General Korak activated a new display showing the limited information they had gathered. "They come from a world called Earth in a remote spiral arm. Long-range sensors confirm the presence of a technological civilization there, but we cannot penetrate their defensive systems to learn more." "How many ships do they have?" "Unknown, Your Majesty. We have only encountered 12 vessels so far, but there could be more." Skal studied the tactical readouts from the battle at Kepler Junction. The human ships had moved with a coordination that suggested advanced training and superior technology. Their weapons were unlike anything in the known galaxy, and their defensive systems had absorbed Skarath plasma fire without apparent damage. "Send Admiral Thex with the 3rd Fleet," he ordered. 100 ships should be enough to deal with 12 human vessels. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should try negotiation first. These humans might be willing to discuss terms." Emperor Skal turned to face his general, eyes glowing with anger. "The Skarath Empire does not negotiate with primitives. We conquered this galaxy through strength, and strength will solve this problem as well. 3 days later, Admiral Thex led his fleet into the Proxima system, where human ships had been spotted rescuing Coalition survivors. He expected to find the same 12 vessels that had defeated Gorath, but instead discovered something that made his blood run cold. 36 human ships waited in formation around the refugee convoy they were protecting. They were not running or hiding. They were prepared for battle. Human vessels, this is Admiral Thex of the Scarith Imperial Navy. You are outnumbered 3-1. Surrender immediately and you will be allowed to live as slaves. The response came from Captain Amy Rodriguez aboard the UES Defiant. Admiral, you are interfering with a humanitarian rescue operation. Withdraw from this system or we will remove you. Thex laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through his ship's bridge. Remove us? With 36 ships against 100? You are either very brave or very stupid. We prefer to think of ourselves as very prepared, Rodriguez replied calmly. The Skarath fleet attacked in the traditional formation that had served them well against Coalition forces. Energy weapons blazed across space as 100 warships concentrated their fire on the human vessels. Admiral Thex expected to see enemy ships vaporize under the massive bombardment. Instead, he watched in horror as human adaptive armor absorbed the energy and redirected it harmlessly into space. The human ships continued their advance without slowing down, then they returned fire. Captain Rodriguez had learned from the battle at Kepler Junction. Instead of engaging the entire Skarath fleet directly, the human ships used a tactic called wolfpack hunting. They split into small groups and attacked from multiple directions, focusing their kinetic weapons on individual enemy vessels. The results were devastating. Human destroyers moved through the Skarath formation like sharks among fish, their railguns punching through enemy hulls with ease. Each kinetic round carried enough energy to cripple or destroy a Skarath cruiser, and the humans fired with mechanical precision. Admiral Thex found his command ship under attack by 4 human vessels that seemed to anticipate his every move. When he tried to retreat, they cut off his escape route. When he attempted to ram one of them, they simply moved out of the way and destroyed his engines with surgical precision. How do they know what we are going to do before we do it? His tactical officer asked in panic. Thex did not have an answer. The humans fought like they could read Skarath minds, always one step ahead of every tactical decision. It was as if they had studied Skarath military doctrine for years and developed specific counters for every strategy. Within an hour, the Third Fleet was reduced to floating wreckage. 73 Skarath warships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors limped back to friendly space with news that would shake the Empire to its foundations. Captain Rodriguez opened communications with the fleeing Skarath vessels. Admiral Thex, you will report to your Emperor that humanity is now actively protecting Coalition refugees. Any further attacks on civilian populations will result in the complete destruction of your forces. Back on the Skarath homeworld, Emperor Skal listened to his admiral's report with growing fury. 100 ships defeated by 36 humans. It was impossible, but the wreckage proved it had happened. Your Majesty, General Korak said carefully, perhaps it is time to consider that we underestimated these humans. Underestimated? Skal's voice rose to a roar. They are primitives from a single world. How can they possess such power? They come from a death world, Your Majesty. Perhaps that means something we did not understand. Skal had conquered dozens of species in his rise to power. Some had been technologically advanced. Others had possessed superior numbers, but all had eventually fallen to Skarath determination and firepower. The idea that a single species could stand against his empire was unthinkable, but the evidence was mounting. In the days following the battle at Proxima, human ships appeared throughout Skarath territory. They did not attack military installations or try to conquer planets. Instead, they focused on rescue operations and supply line disruption. Human forces struck at convoy routes, destroying cargo ships carrying supplies to Skarath frontline forces. They appeared without warning, completed their missions, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. It was a type of warfare the Skarath had never encountered before. Captain Sam Collins led many of these raids, using hit-and-run tactics that left Skarath commanders confused and frustrated. His ships would strike at a supply convoy, destroy the escorts, and disappear into hyperspace before the main fleet could respond. They are like ghosts. one Skarath captain reported after losing his entire convoy to a human raid. They appear from nowhere, strike with devastating force, and vanish without a trace. Emperor Skal found himself facing a problem he had never encountered before. The humans were not fighting the kind of war he understood. They were not trying to hold territory or conquer systems. Instead, they were systematically weakening his empire's ability to maintain its conquests. "Send the 10th Fleet to hunt down these human raiders," he ordered. 200 ships should be enough to catch them. General Korak hesitated before responding. "Your Majesty, we have already lost over 100 vessels to human attacks. Perhaps we should consider a different approach." "What do you suggest?" Skal demanded. "A strategic withdrawal from the outer territories. Consolidate our forces and prepare proper defenses before engaging the humans again." The suggestion that the mighty Skarath Empire should retreat from any enemy filled Skal with rage, but he could not ignore the tactical situation. Human ships were making his supply lines impossible to maintain, and his frontline forces were running short of ammunition and supplies. For the first time in his reign, Emperor Skal was forced to consider the possibility that the Skarath Empire might not be invincible after all. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the UES Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison studied reports from human forces throughout the galaxy. Operation Shepherd was succeeding beyond their wildest expectations. Not only were they rescuing coalition survivors, but they were forcing the Skarath Empire to question its own military superiority. "How long before they realize what we are really doing?" Major Lisa Grant asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "By then it will be too late. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity does not give up, and we do not leave our friends behind." Colonel Amy Rodriguez crouched behind the twisted remains of a Skarath transport vehicle and watched the enemy garrison through her tactical scope. The mining world of Keitha 7 had been under Skarath control for 8 months. Its population of crystal-based Lithians forced to work in the dangerous deep mines that extracted rare elements needed for starship construction. 200 guards, standard patrol patterns, heavy weapons emplacements at the main gate. She whispered into her comm unit. "Civilian workers are being held in the southern compound." Her voice was picked up by the 48 human soldiers scattered throughout the occupied city, invisible to Skarath sensors thanks to their advanced camouflage systems. Each Marine wore adaptive armor that could change color and texture to match the surrounding environment, making them nearly impossible to detect. "Command confirms civilian extraction is priority 1, came the reply from Captain Tony Baker aboard the UES Ranger in orbit above the planet. "You have 6 hours before Skarath reinforcements arrive from the next system." Rodriguez smiled grimly. 6 hours was more than enough time for what they had planned. The liberation of Keitha 7 had been planned for 3 weeks, ever since human intelligence intercepted Skarath communications, describing the slave labor conditions on the world. Unlike the space battles that had made headlines throughout the galaxy, this would be humanity's first major ground operation against Skarath forces. "Team Alpha, move to positions around the communications array," Rodriguez commanded. "Team Beta, take out the weapon emplacements. Team Gamma, prepare for civilian evacuation. Execute in 30 seconds." The attack began with surgical precision. Human soldiers moved through the occupied city like ghosts, eliminating Skarath guards with silenced weapons before they could raise an alarm. Their night vision equipment and motion sensors gave them advantages the reptilian species had never encountered. Sergeant Rick Palmer led Team Alpha through the industrial district where Skarath forces had set up their primary communications hub. The building was guarded by 12 soldiers armed with plasma rifles, but they were positioned to defend against conventional assault, not infiltration by invisible enemies. "Guards neutralized," Palmer reported as his team disabled the communications array. "Skarath Command will not know anything is wrong for at least 2 hours." Meanwhile, Team Beta was systematically destroying the heavy weapon emplacements that protected the garrison. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos used shaped charges to take out the plasma cannons while her squad eliminated the gun crews. The explosions were carefully timed to sound like equipment malfunctions rather than coordinated attacks. "All weapon positions secured," Santos reported. "The garrison is defenseless against orbital bombardment if needed, but orbital bombardment would not be necessary." The human ground assault was designed to minimize civilian casualties and infrastructure damage. Instead of destroying the enemy, they would simply make it impossible for Skarath forces to maintain control. Team Gamma reached the civilian compound where 3,000 Lithian workers were being held prisoner. The crystal-based aliens had been forced to work 18-hour shifts in dangerous conditions, mining the rare elements that powered Skarath warships. Many were sick or injured from the harsh treatment. "This is Colonel Rodriguez," she announced as her soldiers cut through the compound's security barriers. "We are here to get you out." The Lithian prisoners stared in amazement as human soldiers appeared from seemingly empty air, their camouflage systems deactivating to reveal combat armor, unlike anything they had ever seen. Some of the aliens cowered in fear, thinking they were facing a new type of Skarath weapon. "Do not be afraid," Rodriguez said, using her universal translator to speak in the Lithian language. "We are humans. We are here to rescue you." An elderly Lithian stepped forward, her crystalline features reflecting the light from the compound's security lamps. "Humans, but you are extinct. The Skarath told us so." "The Skarath were wrong about many things," Rodriguez replied. "Can you help us organize the evacuation? We need to move quickly." The liberation of the civilian compound proceeded smoothly, as Lithian prisoners helped guide their rescuers to hidden wounded and showed them the safest routes through the mining complex. Human medics treated injured aliens with equipment specifically designed to work with non-human physiology. But the rescue operation was only half of the mission. While the civilians were being evacuated to waiting transport ships, other human teams were sabotaging the mining equipment that made Ketha 7 valuable to the Skarath Empire. Explosives placed in key locations would make it impossible to resume operations for months. "Primary mining lasers are offline," reported Lieutenant Bob Turner from the main excavation site. "It will take them weeks just to figure out what we did, and months to repair the damage." The Skarath garrison finally realized something was wrong when the morning shift change revealed empty guard posts and disabled communications equipment. By then it was too late to stop the evacuation, but the remaining enemy forces attempted to prevent the human soldiers from escaping. This was what Colonel Rodriguez had been waiting for. The Skarath, troops who emerged from their barracks to confront the human infiltrators, found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered. Human soldiers did not fight in formation or follow predictable tactics. Instead, they used the urban environment to their advantage, turning every building and alley into a potential ambush point. Skarath plasma weapons were designed for open battlefield combat, not close quarters fighting in an urban environment. The humans moved too fast and stayed too close for the energy weapons to be effective. When Skarath soldiers tried to use their superior numbers to surround human positions, they found themselves targeted by snipers firing from impossible angles. "Fall back to the command center," ordered Captain Vash Kalor, the garrison commander. "Call for reinforcements from orbit." But the orbital reinforcements were dealing with their own problems. Human ships had appeared in the system and were engaging the Skarath fleet with the same devastating effectiveness they had shown in previous battles. Captain Baker's destroyer squadron was systematically eliminating enemy vessels while providing air support for the ground forces. "This is impossible," Kalor hissed as his troops continued to fall to invisible enemies. "How can primitive Deathworlders fight like this?" The answer came from decades of human military experience, refined through constant warfare on Earth. While other species had developed advanced technology and energy weapons, humans had learned to use terrain, stealth, and superior tactics to defeat numerically superior enemies. The battle for Ketha 7 ended 6 hours after it began. The entire Skarath garrison had been eliminated or captured. 3,000 Lithian civilians had been evacuated to safety, and the mining facilities had been destroyed beyond repair. Human casualties totaled 0 killed and 3 wounded. "Mission accomplished," Rodriguez reported to Admiral Hayes aboard the flagship. "Ketha 7 is liberated and will no longer provide resources to support Skarath military operations." The liberation of Ketha 7 was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, human forces struck at Skarath installations throughout their territory. Captain Lisa Hayes led a raid on a supply depot that fed 12 different systems. Commander Sam Collins destroyed a shipyard that had been building new Skarath cruisers. Each operation followed the same pattern. Human forces would appear without warning, complete their mission with minimal casualties, and disappear before enemy reinforcements could respond. They did not try to hold territory or establish permanent bases. Instead, they made it impossible for the Skarath Empire to maintain its conquests. Emperor Skal watched his empire slowly crumble under the pressure of this new kind of warfare. Supply lines were cut, garrisons were eliminated, and civilian populations were rescued faster than they could be recaptured. The humans were not just defeating Skarath forces. They were making the entire concept of the empire unsustainable. "Your Majesty," General Korak reported during a strategy meeting, "we have lost contact with 47 garrison forces in the past month. Human raids have destroyed 60% of our supply infrastructure and rescued over 2 million civilian prisoners." "How many human casualties?" Skal demanded. "Intelligence estimates suggest fewer than 100 killed or wounded across all operations." The numbers were staggering. A few thousand human soldiers were systematically dismantling an empire that controlled hundreds of star systems. They were not winning through superior technology alone, but through tactics and training that made them incredibly effective in small unit operations. "What do our analysts say about human military doctrine?" Skal asked. General Korak hesitated before answering. "They believe humans have been fighting wars for much longer than any other known species. Their combat methods are refined through thousands of years of constant conflict. They know how to fight in ways we never learned." Emperor Skal stared at the tactical displays showing the steady erosion of his empire's control. Red markers indicated lost positions. Yellow showed disrupted supply lines, and blue represented rescued civilian populations. The map looked like a disease was spreading through Skarath space. For the first time since becoming emperor, Skal began to consider the possibility that the Skarath Empire might need to negotiate rather than conquer. The human Admiral Ben Hayes stood before the holographic display in his flagship's war room, studying intelligence reports that painted a picture of an empire in chaos. The Skarath Empire that had seemed unstoppable 6 months ago was now struggling to maintain control over its own territory. "Status report," he said to the assembled officers. Major Lisa Grant stepped forward with a data pad. "Operation Shepherd has exceeded all projections, sir. We have rescued over 4 million coalition civilians and eliminated approximately 40% of Skarath military infrastructure. Enemy supply lines are disrupted across 67 systems." Captain Jake Morrison added his own assessment. "Skarath fleet strength is down by 30%. They are pulling ships back from frontline positions to protect their core worlds. The Outer Rim territories are effectively under human control now." Hayes nodded with satisfaction. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope. By focusing on rescue operations and supply line disruption rather than territory conquest, humanity had found the Skarath Empire's weakness. They were not just a military force but an occupation government that depended on maintaining control over hundreds of worlds. "What about Emperor Skal's response?" Hayes asked. Commander Sam Collins brought up a new display showing Skarath fleet movements. "Intelligence suggests they are planning something big, sir. Ships are being pulled back from all frontier positions and concentrated around their homeworld. It looks like they are preparing for a major counterattack." "How major are we talking about?" "Our best estimate is 800 to 1,000 ships, sir. Everything they have left." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed this information. The human expeditionary fleet consisted of 48 ships total, including support vessels and transports. Even with their technological advantages, those odds would be challenging. "Where do they think we will strike next?" Hayes asked. Major Grant consulted her intelligence reports. "All indicators suggest they expect us to attack their core industrial systems. Standard military doctrine would be to cripple their ability to build new ships." Hayes smiled grimly. "Then we will not do what they expect." "What is the status of coalition survivors in the outer territories?" "Most have been evacuated to safe zones, sir. The largest remaining group is at the Haven Station complex in the Centauri Nebula. About 200,000 refugees from various species." "Perfect." Hayes turned to address the room. "Gentlemen and ladies, Emperor Skal is about to learn an important lesson about human military thinking. We do not fight the war our enemy wants us to fight." The plan that emerged from the strategy session was audacious even by human standards. Instead of attacking Skarath industrial targets as expected, the human fleet would strike at the one thing the enemy had not adequately protected: their homeworld itself. Captain Amy Rodriguez raised a concern. "Sir, attacking their capital directly could be seen as an escalation. We have been careful to focus on military targets and rescue operations. The homeworld assault will not target civilians," Hayes assured her. Our objective is to force Emperor Skal into a direct confrontation under circumstances of our choosing. He has been reactive so far, responding to our initiatives. Time to make him come to us. 3 days later, the human fleet materialized in the outer system of Skaratha Prime, the Skarath homeworld. Long-range sensors showed massive, orbital defense platforms and hundreds of ships, guarding the approaches to the planet. "This is Admiral Ben Hayes. Of the Human Expeditionary Force," came the broadcast on all frequencies. "Emperor Skal, you have exactly 24 hours to begin the complete withdrawal of Skarath forces from occupied coalition territory. Failure to comply will result in the systematic destruction of your orbital infrastructure." The response from the planet's surface was immediate and furious. "Primitive Deathworlders, you dare threaten the heart of the Skarath Empire? We have 1,000 ships ready to crush your pathetic fleet." "Actually," Hayes replied calmly, "we count 937 ships. Our intelligence is quite accurate." Emperor Skal himself took control of the communications channel. "Admiral Hayes, you have made a fatal mistake coming here. My entire fleet will destroy you, and then we will hunt down every human world and reduce them to ash." "Your Majesty," Hayes said with mock politeness, "you are welcome to try. But first, let me demonstrate what will happen to your orbital installations if you refuse our terms." The UES Valiant fired a single kinetic round at an unmanned communications satellite. The projectile struck with such force that the satellite simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the impact energy. "That was a warning shot," Hayes announced. "The next targets will be your orbital defense platforms. You have 23 hours and 58 minutes to make your decision." What followed was the longest day in Skarath history. Emperor Skal paced through his palace while his military advisors debated their options. The human fleet maintained its position just outside the range of the orbital defenses, daring the Skarath to come out and fight. "We could overwhelm them with sheer numbers," General Korak suggested. 900 ships against 48 should be enough, even with their advanced weapons." "Should be," Skal repeated grimly. "How many times have we said that about these humans? They have defeated every force we have sent against them. This time is different, Your Majesty. They cannot use hit-and-run tactics against our entire fleet in open space." Skal studied the tactical displays showing his assembled armada. It represented the accumulated military might of the Skarath Empire, built over decades of conquest and expansion. If this fleet was destroyed, his empire would fall within months. But if he did nothing, the humans would systematically destroy his orbital defenses and leave Skaratha Prime defenseless. Either way, his empire was at risk. "Send the fleet," he ordered finally. "All ships. We end this threat once and for all." The Skarath Armada moved out from the homeworld with ponderous majesty, 937 warships arranged in battle formation. It was the largest concentration of military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. Enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. Admiral Hayes watched them approach on his tactical display and felt a moment of doubt. Even with human technological advantages, the odds were overwhelming. But then he remembered the millions of coalition civilians they had rescued, the worlds liberated from Skarath occupation, and the hope they had restored to a galaxy that had seemed lost. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes," he broadcast to the human fleet. "Today we prove that technology and courage can triumph over numbers and oppression. Make humanity proud." The battle began when the two fleets were still millions of kilometers apart. Skarath plasma weapons reached out across space, creating streams of energy that could melt through planetary crusts. The humans responded with kinetic bombardments that struck with the force of nuclear weapons. But this battle would not be won by long-range fire. "Execute Formation Delta," Hayes ordered, and the human fleet split into 6 separate wolf packs. Each group contained 8 ships designed to work together as a coordinated unit, using their superior speed and maneuverability to isolate portions of the enemy fleet. Captain Morrison led his wolf pack against the Skarath left flank, his destroyers moving in a complex spiral pattern that confused enemy targeting systems. When the Skarath ships turned to engage him, they exposed their rear quarters to Captain Rodriguez's group attacking from another angle. It was 3-dimensional chess played with starships, and the humans had been preparing for this game much longer than their enemies. Each wolf pack operated independently while contributing to the overall battle plan, striking at Skarath formations and withdrawing before they could be overwhelmed. The Skarath fleet, designed for traditional line-of-battle engagements, found itself unable to bring its superior numbers to bear effectively. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, always attacking from unexpected directions. "They are everywhere at once," reported a Skarath captain as his cruiser took fire from 3 different angles. How do they coordinate these attacks? The answer lay in human military doctrine developed through centuries of warfare. Unlike alien species that had evolved beyond large-scale conflicts, humanity had never stopped refining their combat techniques. They understood how to use superior training and tactics to defeat numerically superior enemies. Emperor Skal watched from his palace as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by 48 human ships. The tactical displays showed Skarath vessels being destroyed faster than they could be replaced, while human casualties remained surprisingly light. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are primitives from a single world. How can they be so effective?" General Korak had finally begun to understand what they were facing. "Your Majesty, I believe we have made a fundamental error in our assessment of human capabilities. They are not primitives. They may be the most militarily advanced species in the galaxy." The battle raged for 6 hours, and when it ended, the Skarath Empire's military power was broken forever. Over 700 warships had been destroyed or disabled, while the human fleet had lost only 3 vessels with 2 others damaged but repairable. Admiral Hayes opened communications with the P. Commander Zeph Callan stood in the observation deck of Haven Station and watched human transport ships arrive with another group of rescued coalition civilians. The massive space station had become the primary refugee center for the Outer Territories, housing over 300,000 survivors from dozens of different worlds. It had been 2 weeks since the Battle of Skaratha Prime, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The mighty Skarath Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just months before, was now in full retreat from its conquered territories. Their military power had been broken in a single engagement by a species most people had believed was extinct. "The latest convoy is arriving from the Kepler sector," reported Lieutenant Virathos. 200,000 Lithian miners and their families, freed from Skarath labor camps. Kalen nodded, watching as the human ships docked with practiced efficiency. Every day brought new proof of humanity's commitment to rescuing coalition survivors, regardless of species or location. They had kept their promise to evacuate every civilian they could find. "Any word from the peace negotiations?" he asked. "The talks are continuing on neutral station," Vera replied. "Emperor Skal has agreed to withdraw from all occupied coalition territory within 6 months. In exchange, humanity will not pursue Skarath forces back to their core worlds." It was a reasonable settlement, Kalen thought. The humans had demonstrated they could destroy the Skarath Empire completely if they chose to do so. But instead they were offering terms that allowed both sides to end the conflict with dignity intact. The door to the observation deck opened, and Captain Jake Morrison entered. The human officer had become a familiar sight at Haven Station, coordinating rescue operations and working with coalition officials to organize the massive refugee relief effort. "Commander Kalen," Morrison said with a slight nod, "I wanted to inform you that the evacuation of the Vega colonies is complete. That brings the total number of rescued civilians to 4.7 million. "Amazing," Callan replied. "When the coalition first collapsed, we thought those people were lost forever. Your species has performed miracles." Morrison looked uncomfortable with the praise. "We did what anyone would do when faced with innocent people in danger. The real miracle will be helping all these refugees rebuild their lives." That was something Kalen had been thinking about extensively. The rescued coalition civilians came from dozens of different worlds, many of which had been completely destroyed by Skarath occupation forces. Entire species were now homeless, dependent on the charity of others for their basic survival. "What happens next?" Kellen asked. "Where do all these people go?" "That is being discussed at the highest levels," Morrison replied. "Admiral Hayes has been in communication with Earth about long-term solutions. Humanity is prepared to offer assistance in relocating refugee populations and helping them establish new colonies." "Your government would do that? Spend resources to help alien species they had never met before?" Morrison smiled slightly. "Commander, you have to understand something about human psychology. We have a very strong instinct to help others who are in trouble. It is part of what makes us who we are." Kalan thought about that as he watched human medical teams treating injured refugees in the station's hospital sections. Doctors and nurses worked around the clock to help patients whose biology was completely different from their own, using medical equipment specifically designed to work with non-human physiology. It was not just professional competence, he realized. The humans genuinely cared about these people they had never met before. They were not rescuing coalition civilians because of political agreements or strategic advantages. They were doing it because they believed it was right. "Captain Morrison," Kalan said, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Why did your species choose to reveal themselves now? You could have remained hidden and avoided this entire conflict. Why risk human lives to save alien civilians?" Morrison considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Because isolation is not safety, Commander. We knew that if the Skarath Empire conquered the entire galaxy, they would eventually find Earth. Better to fight them when we had allies and could choose the terms of engagement. But you had no allies when you started fighting. The coalition was already defeated. Then we made new allies," Morrison replied simply. "Every civilian we rescued, every coalition officer who saw human ships arrive when all seemed lost. Those people became our allies through shared experience rather than formal treaties." Kalan understood what he meant. The refugees at Haven Station came from 12 different species, but they all shared one common experience. They had been saved by humans who appeared out of nowhere to help them. That created bonds that formal diplomacy could never achieve. Over the following days, Kalan had the opportunity to observe human operations throughout the station. What impressed him most was not their advanced technology or military efficiency, but their attention to detail and caring for people who were completely different from themselves. Human engineers modified life support systems to accommodate the specific atmospheric needs of different species. Human psychologists developed therapy programs to help traumatized refugees cope with their experiences. Human teachers worked with alien children to help them continue their education despite being displaced from their homeworlds. It was the kind of comprehensive humanitarian effort that required not just resources, but genuine commitment to the welfare of others. The humans were not just winning a war, they were taking responsibility for its aftermath. The peace negotiations concluded successfully 3 weeks later. Emperor Skull signed a formal surrender agreement that required Skarath forces to withdraw from all occupied coalition territory within 6 months. Reparations would be paid to help rebuild destroyed worlds, and Skarath leaders would face trial for war crimes committed during the occupation. Admiral Hayes arrived at Haven Station to personally oversee the transition process. Kalan met with him in the station's main conference room, along with representatives from all the surviving coalition species. "The immediate crisis is over," Hayes announced to the assembled group. "Skarath forces are withdrawing as agreed, and we estimate that all coalition civilians will be free within 4 months. What about long-term reconstruction?" asked Dr. Yex Thalin, a representative of the Christek species. "Most of our worlds were strip-mined or bombed into uninhabitable wastelands. Earth's government has authorized a comprehensive aid program," Hayes replied. "We will provide the resources and technology needed to restore damaged worlds and establish new colonies for displaced populations." Commander Zeph Kalan raised his hand. "Admiral, why is humanity willing to make such a commitment? This will cost your people enormous amounts of money and resources." Hayes smiled. "Commander, humanity learned long ago that peace and stability benefit everyone. A galaxy full of thriving civilizations is good for humanity, just as it is good for every other species. But surely there must be some benefit to humanity as well." "Of course there is," Hayes admitted. "We hope to establish trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense agreements with the reformed coalition. But those benefits come from cooperation, not conquest." The conversation continued for several hours as they discussed the practical details of post-war reconstruction. Human engineers would help restore damaged infrastructure. Human agricultural experts would assist in developing food production on refugee worlds. Human scientists would share medical knowledge to help treat the lingering effects of Skarath occupation. As the meeting concluded, Kalan found himself thinking about the database entries that had first mentioned humans as an extinct Death World species. The records had been wrong about their extinction but correct about their origin. Humans had evolved on a world so dangerous that survival required constant adaptation and cooperation. That experience had shaped them into a species that could not ignore the suffering of others, even when those others were completely alien. They had developed the technology and tactics to fight the most dangerous enemies, but also the compassion to care for refugees and victims. A week later, Kalen received orders to report to the newly established Coalition Reconstruction Committee, where he would coordinate refugee resettlement efforts with human officials. As his shuttle approached the committee's headquarters on Titan Station, he reflected on how much had changed since that desperate flight from Nexus Prime. The galaxy had been saved not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by a species that understood that true strength came from protecting those who could not protect themselves. Humanity had arrived when all seemed lost and turned the tide not just of battle, but of civilization itself. The Scarith Empire was retreating, coalition worlds were being liberated, and millions of refugees were being given the chance to rebuild their lives. Most importantly, the galaxy now knew that it was not alone. When darkness threatened to consume everything, there were people willing to stand up and fight for what was right. Commander Zeph Kalen had learned many things about humans during the war, but the most important lesson was simple. They never gave up and they never left anyone behind. That was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. 5 years after the Battle of Skaratha Prime, Commander Zeph Kalen walked through the rebuilt streets of New Nexus, the capital city of the Reformed Coalition. The crystal spires gleamed in the sunlight of the system's twin stars, and beings from dozens of different species moved through the bustling marketplace that had replaced the old military command center. It was hard to believe this was the same world where he had watched the original coalition die in flames. The Scarith occupation had lasted only 8 months, but the destruction had been thorough. Every major building had been reduced to rubble. The orbital facilities had been completely destroyed, and the population had been scattered across the galaxy. Now, thanks to human reconstruction efforts and coalition determination, Nexus Prime had been reborn as something greater than it had ever been before. The morning briefing is ready. Sir, Lieutenant Virathos said as she approached. Her crystalline features showed the healthy glow that indicated good nutrition and low stress levels, a marked contrast to the desperate creature who had fled the planet years ago. Kalen nodded and followed her toward the Coalition Council building, a magnificent structure that combined architectural elements from all member species. Human engineers had designed it to be both beautiful and practical, with meeting rooms that could accommodate the environmental needs of oxygen breathers, methane breathers, and the various other atmospheric requirements of coalition members. Inside the main conference room, representatives from 18 different species were gathering for the weekly coordination meeting. The Reformed Coalition was larger than the original alliance had ever been, with new members joining regularly as word spread about the stability and prosperity that membership provided. Admiral Ben Hayes took his seat at the head of the table, representing Earth's interests, but also serving as an advisor to the coalition government. His hair was grayer now, and there were new lines around his eyes, but his presence still commanded respect from everyone in the room. Status reports, Hayes said simply, and the meeting began. Dr. Yex Thalen of the Christek species reported first. Reconstruction of the Kepler sector mining worlds is ahead of schedule. Human terraforming technology has restored atmospheric balance on 6 planets, and we expect full agricultural production to resume within 18 months. Similar reports came from representatives of other species. The Lithian crystal growers had established new colonies in 3 star systems. The Vorthak gas breathers had rebuilt their fleet and were providing security patrols for trade routes. The aquatic Alterians had developed new underwater cities that served as research centers for marine biology. What about the former Skarath territories? Kalen asked. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral Morrison and serving as humanity's primary liaison with coalition forces, consulted his datapad. Integration is proceeding smoothly. Most Scarith worlds have applied for protected status under coalition oversight. Their new government is cooperating fully with war crimes tribunals and reparation payments. It had taken 2 years for the Scarith Empire to completely collapse after their defeat at their homeworld. Without their military dominance, the subject species they had conquered rose in rebellion. Some Scarith worlds had descended into civil war, while others had established democratic governments and asked for coalition protection. Emperor Skull had been tried for war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment on a prison world administered by coalition justice officials. His former generals and admirals faced similar fates, while ordinary Scarath citizens were given opportunities to rebuild their society along more peaceful lines. Any security threats? Hayes asked. Minor piracy in the Outer Rim territories, reported Colonel Amy Rodriguez, who now commanded Coalition security forces. Nothing we cannot handle with routine patrols. The galaxy is more peaceful now than it has been in decades. That was the most remarkable change, Kalen reflected. The destruction of Scarath military power had eliminated the primary source of instability in the galaxy. Without the threat of conquest hanging over them, individual species could focus on trade, exploration, and cultural development instead of military defense. The meeting continued with reports on scientific research, trade negotiations, and cultural exchange programs. Human universities were accepting alien students, while Coalition scientists worked on joint research projects that benefited all member species. Trade volumes had increased by over 300% since the war ended, bringing prosperity to worlds that had barely survived the Scarath occupation. After the official meeting concluded, Kalen lingered to speak privately with Admiral Hayes. They walked out onto the building's observation deck, which offered a panoramic view of the city below. "It is amazing what can be accomplished when people work together," Kalen said. Hayes nodded. "The Coalition is stronger now than it ever was before the war. Adversity has a way of bringing out the best in people. What about humanity's role going forward? Will Earth remain involved in galactic affairs?" "Of course," Hayes replied. "We have learned that isolation is not really possible in a connected galaxy. Besides, we have made too many friends to walk away now." That was true, Kalen knew. Human culture had spread throughout Coalition space, while Earth had absorbed influences from dozens of alien civilizations. Human restaurants in New Nexus served cuisine from 12 different worlds, while alien art galleries displayed works that would have been impossible before first contact. The cultural exchange went deeper than food and entertainment. Human concepts of individual rights and democratic government had influenced political development on many Coalition worlds. Meanwhile, alien philosophies of ecological balance and long-term thinking had gained popularity on Earth and human colonies. "There is something else," Hayes said. "Something I wanted to discuss with you privately." He activated a privacy screen that would prevent their conversation from being overheard, then continued in a more serious tone. "Our long-range exploration ships have detected signs of another potential threat. Beyond the galactic rim, there are energy signatures that suggest a large civilization moving in our direction." Kalen felt his gills flutter with concern. "Another conquering empire? We do not know yet. It could be traders, explorers, or refugees fleeing from something even worse. But given what happened with the Scarath, we cannot afford to be caught unprepared. What do you propose?" Hayes smiled. "A joint exploration mission. Human ships working with Coalition vessels to make contact and assess the situation before it reaches inhabited space. If they are peaceful, we welcome them. If they are hostile, we stop them before they can threaten civilian populations." It was exactly the kind of proactive approach that had saved the galaxy from Scarath conquest, Kalen realized. Instead of waiting for threats to develop, humanity preferred to address problems before they became crises. "The Coalition Council will need to vote on such a mission," Kalen said. "I know. That is why I am discussing it with key members first. We need unanimous support for this to work properly." Over the following weeks, Kalan helped organize support for the exploration mission among Coalition representatives. The debate was extensive but not contentious. Everyone remembered how unprepared they had been for the Scarath threat, and nobody wanted to repeat that experience. The vote was unanimous. 6 months later, a joint fleet of human and Coalition ships departed for the Galactic Rim under Admiral Morrison's command. The expedition included scientists, diplomats, and military officers from 8 different species, representing the largest cooperative venture in galactic history. Kalen stood on the observation deck of the UES Enterprise, Admiral Morrison's flagship, and watched the familiar stars fade behind them as they entered the unknown regions beyond mapped space. Beside him, human and alien crew members worked together with the casual efficiency that had become commonplace in the years since first contact. "Nervous about what we might find?" Morrison asked as he joined Kalen at the viewing port. "Curious more than nervous," Kalen replied. "Whatever is out there, we will face it together. That makes all the difference." Morrison nodded. Humanity learned something important during the war. We are stronger when we work with others than when we stand alone. That lesson has served us well. As the expedition fleet jumped to hyperspace and disappeared into the cosmic darkness, Callan thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. From the desperate refugee fleeing Nexus Prime to a senior official in the Reformed Coalition, his personal story had paralleled the galaxy's transformation. The Skarath Empire had seemed unstoppable until human soldiers arrived and turned the tide of battle. But the real victory had not been won through superior weapons or tactics. It had been won through compassion, determination, and the simple belief that all sentient beings deserved to live free from fear and oppression. Now the galaxy was preparing to face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that they would face them together. Human ships and coalition vessels explored the unknown as partners, ready to defend civilization against any threat that might emerge from the darkness between the stars. The Reformed Coalition had become more than a military alliance. It was a community of species working together to build a better future for all their children. And at the heart of that community were the humans who had arrived when all SI